Welcome back to the Atlantic Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Arsenault. On today's episode, we have Andrew Smith from Atlantic Masonry Institute and Darrell Jerrett from Darim Masonry. This episode's all about the masonry trade, Atlantic Masonry Institute's role in the industry and their support of contractors and other parties, Darum Masonry's company history, running a large masonry company in Halifax in Atlantic Canada, working on projects such as the Nova Center, and much more. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Atlantic Construction Podcast. Today we have with us Andrew Smith, masonry engineer with the Atlantic Masonry Institute, former student at Dalhousie, Bachelor of Engineering, and Andrew's been with the Atlantic Masonry Institute for 3 years. Also have contractor with us today in the masonry industry, Darrell Jerrett Jr. With Darim Masonry. Darum's been in business for 37 years, and Darrell's a part owner and project manager. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's great.
Yeah. Maybe you can kick us off, Andrew, and just sort of just kind of give us a little backstory to the Atlantic Masonry Institute and sort of the services it provides in the industry.
No, Atlantic Masonry Institute, it's been around pushing about 4 years now. I joined the fray 3 years in. So what it is, it's basically the masonry industry mixed up with contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, and the union members all kind of got together and realized that one of the biggest hurdles that they were coming up towards is education, whether that's from the design community, whether that's from the contractor standpoint, and not only educating both, but getting them both on the same page. The contractors were finding that to get on a job site, they'd look at the drawings, see that that's just not constructible, and then all of a sudden everything's getting towards extras, and it's just really slowing down the process. So what can we do to educate the design community? So what they ended up doing is they reached out. A few of the contractors had a previous relationship with a national group, which is the Canada Masonry Design Center.
So it was formed by contractors.
It is formed by contractors for contractors, and the suppliers and manufacturers are there to help support them.
Nice.
So whenever they reached out to the national group, which is the Canada Masonry Design Center, their head office is in Mississauga. Had at the time 3 offices across Canada. So they had an office in Calgary, they had one in Saskatoon, then their head office in Mississauga there. They had a team of 6 masonry engineers, a couple doctorates on the table, and they would run and manage the majority of the masonry research across Canada, code compliance, and then clarifications as well. So it just so happened that I was coming through the system. I finished my Bachelor of Engineering at Dal. I had gone back and done my master's doing masonry structural research that was funded through the Canada Masonry Design Center at the time. And it just so happened, again, that the contractors were now looking for that presence at the same time that I was finishing my research, and it just was a pretty good match for us. So that's kind of how I joined the fray. So yeah, it was a really good opportunity for me to be able to come in and join an industry and learn about it, an industry that for the most part, you would consider more on the outside of buildings, where it used to be the main structural element. Like historically, masonry is the best building material for a lot of years before you get the invention of structural steel, reinforced concrete, and so on. So whenever I was hired on, the Atlantic Masonry Institute went from just kind of like a contractor promotion group to more of an education group. So through the funding of the Atlantic Masonry Institute, we were able to open the CMDC Atlantic office over in Dartmouth. Mm-hmm. And at which point I was able to kind of work with the design community, open up a line for engineers, architects, designers, contractor members that were having issues, someone to bounce ideas off of, codes, just making sure they're able to do stuff right. And I was able to use my own knowledge mixed in with the heavy brain trust that we have there in Mississauga with over 30 years of experience.
Nice. So the Atlantic chapter was it 2016?
It was 2017.
2017. Okay.
So the Atlantic Masonry Institute formed in 2016.
Right.
And then I came on board, and at that point we have a shared AMI CMDC office, but that's just me wearing different hats on different days.
Yeah. So just for context, like you're kind of in the middle of all of the players, the contractor, architect, engineer, and you're there to serve the contractor and all the other parties like architects and the design and stuff.
I'm there to serve the industry.
Right.
So the contractors kind of stepped up and like, listen, we'll foot the bill. We want someone that spends 100% of the time doing masonry, whether it's focusing on the research and where we're going to be in 10 years, or it's what exactly is going on today and how do we make sure that the construction that we're doing on the job site is kind of on par with the national group.
Right. So if we have a contractor here, like let's say if Darrell's on a job site and something with the design and the plans isn't matching up for fire rating or for soundproof or load bearing, like do you get involved in the specific project with the?
It depends. Kind of like a contractor can reach out to me and they'll say, listen, like I got this firewall here. They're saying it needs to be 2-hour rated, but it's a 25 centimeter semi-solid, which we know is at least a 3-hour rating. Like I don't want to lay this. Or if I want to use a specific example, and I won't say it where they needed a fire rating or a sound rating and they specified full solid blocks.
Right.
And Darrell can talk about this more because I'm not the one on the job site lifting these blocks up and down. But when those blocks are fully solid, they're heavy and they're not really that nice to lay. And when you're going towards your fire rating, your sound rating, or even the structural strength of the wall, it's better to do it hollow and grout it solid. So it still has all the same properties, but if you think about that cell in your cinder block or your CMU, now you got a nice grout column all the way through, rather than just blocks laid on top of each other, and you're relying on the mortar to bond them
And they
together.
achieve the same fire rate.
Achieve the same everything. So it was a
Right.
quick little easy example of being able to reach out and say,
Yeah.
like, I know you specified these full solid blocks, but if you used hollow and grouted solid, it'd be cheaper, it'd be easier on the labor, and you're actually going to get a better product.
Okay, now so that's a great example. Now I see sort of how you guys can collaborate and how it works. Yeah, maybe Darrell, maybe you can just give us just kind of give us a rundown of Darim Masonry. I know it's a family business. I know you mentioned it's second generation. I know you're third generation masoner. You guys are fully unionized. Maybe just give us like the snapshot of what.
Yeah,
what
as you noted there, we've been in business for about 35 years. My father started this company from the ground up. He moved up here from Cape Breton. I think how the story goes, it was on a Friday. Came up looking for work, got hired on with one of the local companies here, and started hammering it out to get better at his trade and his craft, and ended up opening up this business, and here we are today, 37 years later.
37 years,
and he's
wow.
growing it from just himself and our family. Obviously, all the great employees we have too, and we try to grow and be part of the community as much as we possibly can. So it's been.
So how many guys would you say you guys are running, like for crew wise, like through the run of a year?
It can vary from when our busy times to our slow times, but we go anywhere from 50 employees up to 100 employees,
Right.
depending on how much is on the go.
Right. You mentioned something earlier about the sort of a lot when you're doing masonry, it's either you're setting up staging or you're in hydromobiles or the different lift styles and stuff too. Like what are you guys using now for a lot of the higher buildings that we're seeing in Halifax?
Yeah, so since I came on with the company when I was a little bit younger, a lot of technology has changed over the years. Everything from telehandlers on the job site as opposed to a straight mast forklift or an old gin wheel pulling stuff up to, like you said, hydromobile, staging, nonstop staging, easy scale. And those have been able to allow us to increase our productivity and keep our labor costs down a lot more than what they would be using a standard 5-foot frame or all around scaffolding setups.
And what's the name of the other kind of lift that you guys use, similar to swing staging, but it's
So it's a little bit older technology, but something we've been using and find ourselves using more around the city has jobs have been coming up and the city's growing up rather than out, and the buildings are getting bigger. Is a product called Easy Scale Scaffolding. I do believe it was invented in the 80s, so it's a little bit older technology, but it's bringing back to life. Like I said, now that we're going up, it allows us to go much higher with a lot less footprint and a lot less tie-in. So it's basically a heavy-duty swing stage scaffolding.
Yeah.
Swing
Tongue
stage.
twister there.
Yeah. So it's basically swing stage scaffolding that holds heavy loads, specifically designed for masonry. And what it's allowing us to do is these tight areas in the city where you normally don't have a footprint of 10 to 20 feet to set up your staging, you're able to hang this, and you can crank it up off the ground to give that footprint around. It allows us to get into areas where you typically wouldn't be able to get to.
Nice.
Yeah.
So for recent projects, like let's say some of the bigger projects that Darum's done, like in the last say a few years. Then you mentioned like Queen's Mark,
Yeah,
Irving Shipyard too.
Yeah, there's every project we take pride in. There's quite a bit around the city. We like to think that we do most of the larger masonry around here, or we try to take pride in that. And some of the projects we did that might be notable is the new Nova Center. That was a very big project for us. It took about 2 to 3 years for us to complete that in masonry, which is good size scale. You just mentioned Queen's Mark, which is an all Wallace sandstone product on the exterior there. That was a whole new bag of worms for us, completely different design that we hadn't dealt with before. Aside from just the veneer, we did a hanging ceiling with that. And
in the parkade?
In the parkade. So,
right.
Well, it's like kind of the parkade. It's right off the main street there. You can kind of see it's Porte Cochere's, what the area of the building was called.
Right.
And basically we were hanging 2-inch, 1 foot by 2 foot sandstone as a ceiling. So it'd never been really done in Nova Scotia before. To my knowledge, I don't think it's been done in Canada before. So it's something that we had to come up with. It was a little bit challenging, but
it's been hard on your estimator.
Well, that's it, right?
How many? So for your company and how it's set up, like for Darum, just to give an idea, like with anywhere between 60 and 120 site workers, with how busy you guys are in Nova Scotia. You have, you and your father are owners. So is there just one estimator, a couple estimators?
Our estimator, Jeff, in the office, he's also an owner. So it's kind of a three-way deal.
Right. And you guys are all involved. You kind of 3 sets of eyes.
Yeah, and we all wear multiple hats. We could be doing anything from safety stuff to site supervising to estimating to takeoffs. Right. Jeff deals with the most brunt of the takeoffs and estimating, and me and Dad basically deal with the site supervision and dealing with the man.
Must have been a lot of discussion on the labor portion of the sandstone stuff.
When
you haven't used a product, it's hard to gauge, but you kind of draw from your experience and how long this might take and similar application.
Exactly. Like we didn't know what we were up against, so we had to take a strong number on it to make sure that we were covered, and it was something that was going to work and that we could walk away from it and say, hey, we're really happy with the product. We're happy with the outcome. And I think we were able to accomplish that. We had some hiccups and some setbacks, but nothing we weren't able to overcome and work through, so it worked out well.
Nice. You mentioned the Nova Center. So other than all your CMU block and clay brick and stuff there for your scope, like there's granite on the outside of the Nova Center?
We did
some of the neat stuff that you guys did there.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of something that we're trying to get into a little bit more. Which was a little bit of landscape granite, not so much pavers and stuff along those lines, but just veneer granite putting on it. It was the first time that we got involved with that, and it was just something that had popped up that we kind of threw out there to get involved with, and it ended up working in our favor. We were able to do it. So between hiring the right people and getting some people to have a little bit more experience with that involved with us, we were able to get that completed, and it went well and turned out, in our eyes, really well.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's an amazing project, and I mean, the fact that you were there for 2 or 3 years is it's a long haul.
Yeah,
and,
it was one of the bigger projects we've done in the city. And
do you remember any numbers, like how many square feet of concrete block were in it?
To be honest, I wish I could throw an exact number out.
Yeah. You wouldn't even know. Everything
that
changed
was one
so
of the
much.
jobs that was a big eye opener for us, because there was so many moving pieces.
Yeah.
And stuff was changing, change orders daily, stuff eliminated, stuff added. So it was fluctuating all the time. So so it was hard to, if I would, without going back and looking through the paperwork and seeing where it's at.
I'm not gonna ask
I
you
couldn't even throw a number at you for it, right?
So with a job like that, when Darum gets it, you're kind of the guy project managing, like seeing the project through on the site, kind of managing the labor and a bridge between the office and the.
Yeah, so a little bit of that. We try to put as much towards our workers in the field as we possibly can. We have a foreman on every job site that we're on,
right.
And those foremen, we try to put as much trust in their capabilities. They're the guys that are doing it every single day.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are running into the problems, solving the problems.
And they grew up doing it like yourself.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So they bounce some stuff off of us, and we work together to solve that stuff. But when you're the person that's in the mix every single day, you're the expert. right? So we lean on those guys heavily, and the collaboration from our experience and our abilities from past jobs and other situations that we run into. We can throw a lot at them that they can then take, sort through, and apply, and we try to come up with the best solution between all voices.
Yeah, 100%. I think, for labor-intensive trades like masonry and drywall and just there's all kinds, but the foremen are really the glue that holds it together. I mean, if you have good foremen in the sites, then you're
And that's it,
in
right?
a good place.
And that's it. And the accountability, like when you have someone on there that's working as hard as you right beside you and pushing that, you're going to get most people buying in.
Yeah. You want to shout out to any of your foremen on the show here? I know if I get you to do that, you might leave one out.
Yeah, I won't go name by name,
don't.
but I can say I like to say, and I'm sure most companies would say this, but I like to say that we got the best people in the industry working for us. I know that might not be a fair comment, we're biased with Darum, but we take a lot of pride in the guys that we have working for us, and most of our guys have worked for us for long periods of time. So
That's great.
yeah.
How many, Andrew? How many companies are a member of?
So total Atlantic Masonry Institute, we're floating anywheres between 45 and 50 members, fluctuating on a year-to-year basis. But every year since we've opened, or since we've been as a company, we've always increased our membership. Right. So even in a COVID year, and if you talk to our members, they'll tell you that it's their most expensive membership they have in the industry. We were still able to increase our membership. We brought in 3 new contractors, all actually here in the Halifax area, just realizing what we were doing, and yeah, we kind of like what you're doing. We want to be a part of it, and so it's always great to be able to get more members in. So of that 47, we float just under 50% contractors. With regards to manufacturers, we have the Casey Concrete, the Shaw Brick, we have VJ Rice, concrete products over in Newfoundland. So those would be our main manufacturers here locally, but then we have lots of suppliers too. So all your aero construction products, Bird, you're talking Brampton
Bird
Brick.
Stairs.
Bird Stairs, yeah, sorry. And then Brampton Brick, Shoaldice is represented through a few smaller manufacturers as well. But we do all the different products, materials. Like we have a pretty good snapshot of what our industry really is. All the people, like air vapor barrier suppliers, they're involved as well. So.
Yeah, that's a big part of the trade.
Yeah, so and the union as well. They bring a lot to the table for us.
Yeah, so what's different about our industry association is the union's a big part of it, but we have non-unionized members as part of our association as well. And the union recognizes that the industry is a mix of union and non-unionized member, and they realize that they're fully supporting us because they know whatever we're able to do as an industry is going to benefit the union and the unionized contractors. So in being able to bring in those non-unionized guys just gives us a better scope of the industry, and we're really more of an industry voice rather than the unionized contractor's voice.
Are there any architects that are members?
Architects are not members, no. Right. The whole idea is our association is there to serve the design community. So whether just because they're not in the room doesn't mean that I'm not going to their offices, talking with them, and basically the contractors are paying for my time to work with that design community.
Yeah. It mentions estimating software on the website, MAS.
So that's not an estimating software, that's a structural design software.
Okay.
So it stands for Masonry Analysis and Structural Systems. Right. So in typical structural softwares today, it might be a whole building analysis or a finite element model going through stiffness matrices, whereas what our MAS software does is it designs individual elements. So if you're talking a partition wall in a parking garage, okay, that's an out-of-plane wall. You can apply your loading. It'll run the structural calculations that are based out of the CSA standards. Or if you want to talk about a more intricate design, like a multi-story masonry design or something like that, the newest version of the MAS software, when it came out with version 4, has multi-story design functionality in it, all the way to seismic design considerations as well. So it's really there for the structural engineer, or if per se you're an architect and you might not be the one to sign off on this design, you can quickly run the numbers and get an idea. Okay, before we send it to the structural engineer, I know it's a 20 centimeter block. And then I can start doing my floor plans based off that. So not a whole lot of architects use it, but just for quickly running the numbers and getting an idea, it works really good for that.
I want to piggyback off of that and ask you, Darrell. I know your position's not technically full-time estimator, but I know you've done lots of estimating and you've been in the trade forever. I think masonry is a lot harder to estimate than people outside the trade realize. Like just for little things like all the accessories and your mortar trap and brick ties and cell vent and wedge lock and all that. And then you have like your calculations for grout and mortar and like, do you guys use software, insulation tie-ins? Yeah, it's endless. And there's so many different accessories. And
No,
stuff like that.
Jeff in the office, I'll tell you, man, it's we've made leaps and bounds since he's come on board with new types and styles of doing stuff.
Is he using a software?
No, he's not using any software, so it's all by hand.
Yeah.
All by hand, and
Be surprised how much that still happens.
Yeah, and I think you can't lose track of having that to double check and go back on certain stuff.
And you have your stuff in house. How you guys like to calculate? How many square feet, 8-inch block, and this much mortar for fire rate if you're filling all the cells and all that kind of
exactly.
stuff. You guys have your own.
And like you said, there's a lot of moving parts to doing that takeoff. Like I don't know if, not that I've been familiar with, but to my knowledge, there's nothing that we've used in the past for technology in terms of doing those takeoffs.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things for us that I think it's that comfort level too, where you're right hands on and you're diving in and it's right in front of you on the paper. I'm not saying it won't get to the point. Obviously, all technology can be super beneficial to anybody in terms of productivity and getting through stuff, but I don't think there's anything to replace getting your nose dirty and getting in there and going through stuff.
I think that's a great point. I think just something about having the hard copy of the drawings in front of you where you can just kind of look through it and make notes. It's just, when it's all done on computers, it's hard to transition for a lot of people that are used to doing it that way.
Absolutely.
And not just from an estimating purposes too. Whenever you're going through and actually really focusing on the drawings, you might be able to pick out things you didn't expect at the start. Like even some small little detail, like, oh, frig, I didn't see that in the specification. Like, I need to make sure I focus on that.
And the other thing I think that gets overlooked with estimating is every estimator has their own style and their own way and their own procedure. And those you develop those habits. From what I see, like you said, I'm not in it every day and looking at that stuff. And Jeff really takes the cake on that for us. But from what I see, it's just that habit of every day, like, your process. You're getting your drawings, you're opening them up the same way. You're taking your notes and writing your information down the same way. You're going through them the same way. So that stuff, those habits are making sure that you're hitting everything that you hit that, might have been something missed on the last drawing. Well, this is why it was missed. So, all right, I'm going to put this process in while I'm doing this estimating so I don't miss this area or miss that quantity.
Yeah, I think too, like unlike some other architectural trades, like let's say painting or millwork, or like when you're pricing masonry, you really have to look hard at the structural drawings for all the different, every 2 feet you're tying in a firewall with different steel accessories into structural steel. So it's one of them trades where you can't get away with just sort of looking at section 9. You have to look at structural.
And that's where I think where AMI and CMDC come in huge for us as contractors, because our opinion and how we read something can vary different, and where we can bring them in to be almost as a middleman or acting on our behalf, they can explain those things a lot better, or that so they don't take on costs that we don't need to be taking on, or vice versa. The contract.
Yeah, I got a good example of that actually. It's I think it might have been you. I can't remember if it was you or another contractor. They sent me drawings, and it was about a brick veneer, but it was stack pattern. So instead of the units all overlapping by 50%, they were all stacked on one another. And the note on the drawing was install as per CSA A370, which is the construction installation standard. And anytime you have stack pattern according to CSA, it needs to have joint reinforcing in it. Whereas it wasn't called out in the drawings at all that there was joint reinforcing. It wasn't called out in the specs. It was just install as per A1 or 370. So whenever, I think it was Jeff that reached out to me and he asked me about this, is there any special things I need to think about when I'm doing this stack pattern? Well, yeah, you need joint reinforcing every second or third course. Oh, frig, I didn't bring that. I didn't carry that in my numbers. Well, that's just what is going to be required. So then he was able to include that in the estimate.
And that's a lot of reinforcement.
And that, independing on what the square footage of the wall, that can be a lot of wire, right?
Yeah.
So that's just being able to quickly bounce that idea off of, whereas I stare at the standards for probably 3 hours a day. It's part of my job. It's not fun. It's not the best read you've ever had. But having someone that does stare at the standards that much, it can be helpful in certain situations.
Well, I mean, if I was that contractor, I'd be so grateful that you were there to help me with that.
No, and that's happened on numerous occasions for different stuff. And sometimes it's great. Sometimes it doesn't go the way that we want, but at least we have that backing. At least we've gained that knowledge. At least that's been brought forward. And then the next time that we're having that same conversation, or the next time we're bidding that job, we have that information that, okay, no, now we know we got to carry that, right? Because like Andrew said, and like you said, that it can be very vague, or you're jumping between structural and architectural.
I think now that that's brought up, it's sort of like I can see more clearly now what the purpose and what the mission of the Atlantic Masonry Institute is. It's because you have like you said, it's like one of the oldest methods of construction, like back to the Stone Age, no pun intended, but it's like
it really is.
Yeah. So it's like you have an architectural product here that's also structural, and that's where you kind of come in because you're balancing two different, and you just kind of come in and make life easier with the contractor.
And an architect needs to understand thousands of different products. The technologists that work in that office needs to understand thousands. They don't have the time to really focus.
Yeah.
So being able to all right, we got this big veneer project coming up. Let's reach out to Andrew. Let's do a lunch and learn. He can kind of walk us through the process of all the things we need to think about.
Yeah.
That was the goal in mind when AMI, I think, first formed.
Right. Yeah, it's really neat, and I think we were talking about outside the room before we sat down here, like why isn't there kind of like an institute for other trades? Well, it's like masonry is kind of unique in that way, right?
And it's unique because like it's an architectural product. It's also a structural product.
Yeah.
Like I think the example we were comparing to, why is there not the same kind of industry presence for plumbing, let's say?
Yeah.
Well, it's because of that structural aspect. And not only that it's a structural aspect, the universities don't really do a lot of education with regards to masonry, because if you compare it to structural steel or reinforced concrete, it takes such a small portion of the design pie. Like it's just, if they were really accommodating all the different amount of time design in each material, masonry would still be such a very small chunk of that.
Right.
So the UNB currently is not doing any masonry design with regards to their structural program. DAL has some small masonry components, but it's still not much. So being able to kind of jump in, like a structural engineer, they understand all the concepts. Masonry design is very similar to concrete. It uses a lot of the same concepts, but just being able to go through a couple of examples and like show what the differences are exactly, because masonry is not concrete. Even though the units are concrete and the grout is concrete and the mortar is all technically coming from Portland cement, those are three different materials and they're all going to behave differently.
Yeah.
And you just got to accommodate for that.
And that's interesting you brought that up, because I think Darrell was mentioned earlier about how the union here is different in Canada, or in Atlantic Canada, than it is in the States, where all the trowel trades are part of the same union, like concrete, stucco, EIFS.
Exactly. It's a little bit different. That's more of a comparison between Canada and the States, more so. But I mean, we still have, like, through our union, through our trowel trade, you still have your tile setters and your masons, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit taken off in comparison to the States, where they are doing concrete work.
Yeah.
But we have our hands full here with the amount of masonry work we're doing just with
100%.
laying material. So it's not something that us as a masonry company, I don't know if we'd have the bodies here in Nova Scotia to be able to do so.
Right.
To get into that.
And so Darum's been a union company since the start?
Since the start, yeah.
Right.
I think there was a brief period there when my father was just starting off that.
What's the local?
Wasn't.
What's the
Local 1.
Oh, okay.
Bricklayers and allied crafts workers. And we also draw from the Iluna Laborers Force Union. Yeah.
Right. So maybe just chat about the union, like about the Masonry's union. Like, obviously you guys have a close relationship with them. I mean, you're probably part of the union yourself. And,
Yeah.
And so it's often contractors are, some are union, some are non-union. What are the benefits? What are the?
I think at the end of the day, like, the benefits is the manpower, right? And the accountability and the skill level overall. I think when you get to that step where guys are looking to get in the union and, they're getting pensions and they're getting health plans and they're getting a top wage for where it's at, it allows you to buy into your career a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. We work closely with the union. It's got to be a good relationship like that, because it benefits both of us, and if we're able to help in the industry, and it's going to help them, and wherever they're able to help us in the industry, it's going to help us.
Is there anything going on for training, like in that regard, for that you like to see? Or
So we just got a new president, Jeff Preeper, put in for the Bricklayers Union, and he's been doing a great job stepping up in safety. He used to be an employee with us,
right.
So he kind of has a great idea of where the needs are and the stuff that we got to work on and focus on to keep improving as a trade and helping the union grow. So it's
in regards to safety only, or?
in regards to safety and technology and training and stuff like that, where it's where it isn't an older trade, and most of the people that are in our trade are much older. They're late 40s, mid 50s. You know,
So you don't see a lot of young people getting into that's got to be something that concerns you a little
and
bit.
and yeah, and it is, and that's something that we've been working on with AMI and throughout all the trade or all the contractors in the industry. We've been working hard at trying to get into the schools, try to get masonry out there, because masonry is right in our backyard, and a lot of people don't even realize the amount of suppliers that are from Nova Scotia in relativity to all of Canada. And you can step in if I'm wrong on any of these numbers, but I think that across Canada there's 14 block manufacturing.
I think that number would be a little bit higher than that.
So
But
the
it wouldn't be-
materials are local. Is that what you're
The
saying?
material's all made locally, so every different location will have their own block plant. The only thing that's a little bit different is when you start talking about clay brick. I believe there's only two to three active clay brick plants in Canada right now, with Shaw Brick being one of them. But as far as block manufacturing, those are all done locally. So even just if we talk about the Halifax area, you're getting supply from Shaw Brick, you're getting supply from VJ Rice, you're getting supply from Casey Concrete.
And these are all guys these are the guys you use.
And those are all companies that they have their manufacturing plant within a 200-kilometer radius of downtown.
And they're all local, right? So it's right in our backyard.
Yeah.
It's right there. Right?
And like a journeyman in the masonry union is making as much as as anyone in the carpenters union.
Yeah,
as a journeyman.
$50+ an hour with
Total.
with your benefits. You don't see that on your paycheck.
So
but
it's
that's
just
your-
like, I don't know. Is there some kind of a?
I
what's the
think
reason?
I think with where the world's at now, with the advancements in technology, anybody being able to go in and get information on their phones about different things. I think it's human nature to look for that easy road. Like, I guess to say easy money. Like, if you don't have to go and work hard all day for 8 hours and get a paycheck, what road are you going to take?
I'm just
right?
for sure. And like what I'm wondering, like, why aren't more young people going into carpentry? They're going into plumbing. They're going
Well,
into all the
I
different
think if
trades.
you
But
really
what
think
masonry?
about it, how many teenagers
It's a
know what a
misconception.
2x4 is? How many teenagers have worked with a 2x4 in one way or another? Probably, I'd say like 80-85%. How many of them have held a brick before? Other than thinking it's just the chimney or the outside of their
it's just
school.
not as generically out there.
No,
as
so like even
carpentry.
if like their school was built out of brick, I know I can throw a ball at it and it'll bounce back. That's the extent of where their brain's gonna think.
Yeah,
So
but as far as a craft or a trade, it's still as old as carpentry and as
it's
much
100%.
depth
And
as-
I think the industry and it's not just locally here. Like in Nova Scotia, through the apprenticeship agency, they'll get the stat out. The average age of a bricklayer is 53 years old. That being said, a bricklayer typically works up until his 70s. Like I know a lot of really old bricklayers, like they love the trade and they'll stick there
and
for
it's
a long,
labor
long time.
intensive. These guys.
Well, masonry is one of those good things. If you look, what's everybody doing as they get older or as they further in their career? Most people are trying to be more physically active, get healthier, right? As you age and stuff like that. Well, you have that with these trades. You go into masonry, you're lifting anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 pounds a day, which I know that sounds like a lot, right? But you're doing that and your body gets used to that. So you see someone that comes in starting, an apprentice starting with us from 2 weeks in where he's really struggling physically. Then a month later, he's caught up, he's in shape and he's able to do that work. So I think, these guys that are, like Andrew said, you're 53 years old or 55 years old, but you're doing this physical activity every day. You don't got to get to the gym. You don't have to do these other things because you're doing that work every single day.
So
right?
Darrell, what are kind of some of the things you'd be doing on a job site to help with your workers, just with regards to maybe like ergonomics or something, so kind of help with their bodies?
Well, again, going back to the staging, like the hydromobile stage, where that's allowing the bricklayers to work at one level. So you're not bending over or reaching up all the time. You're just constantly at a same productivity-wise and health-wise, I guess, level, right? You're never exerting yourself.
For people who
too
don't
much.
know what a hydromobile is, just explain that.
So a hydromobile is a hydraulic platform scaffolding, which basically, if you want to think of a 60-foot long scaffolding, that's a platform where guys can work off with two towers that go up that climb through hydraulics, pulling it up each ladder or each rung. And what's changed for us for that is that now you're not upping plank. So workers aren't upping plank and having to stop, get the bricklayers off the wall to up the plank to get up to where you need to go. Now you're starting a motor, pushing a button, you're getting up the levels you need, and in small increments. So it's allowing the laborers not to have to lift as much because these platforms are holding more weight. You can stock more material on. It's allowing the bricklayers not to have to bend over or reach as much, so they're not overexerting themselves or putting themselves in awkward situations. Some of the stuff that we're laying, you can be laying concrete block that are up to 55 pounds, 50 pounds. And, you know, to be in an awkward position trying to reach to lay that over a line or under a thin bed of mortar, you're putting some restraints there, so against your body. So those things have really helped in terms of the industry of
and the life cycle of the health of your
exactly.
And like just from a research standpoint as well, and at the University of Waterloo, I believe is the university right now. I might have that wrong. We have research going on through our national group about ergonomics. So we have bricklayers that are going into the university and they're wearing a full sensor suit. And we're saying, okay, if they're lifting it off the floor, how much force are they putting on their back? How much force are they putting on their shoulders? And then we're comparing that to waist height. Well, what if it's at waist height and they don't have to twist? Well, what if it's above their head? And then we're taking all that data and then we're taking that and we're giving it to the colleges that are teaching these young bricklayers that are trying to enter the trade. Like, this is what you really need to be teaching them for proper technique. This is what's going to put the least amount of strain on their backs and their shoulders. And it's what's ultimately going to create people that enter the trade and stay in the trade if they're doing it right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
No, it's been a lot of advancements, and it's only going up. Like now, you're seeing different things coming for technology, like SAM, like the semi-automated mason, and robots and stuff that are building buildings out of this stuff now.
Wow.
That's just where it's headed, right? So it is getting better, but it's something I do think that we got to keep improving on, and as we get more knowledgeable for health stuff, like one thing with these older gentlemen that are working for us in this trade, they don't have the same mindset for health and self-care as what some of the younger guys coming up are doing. So, you know, to introduce this stuff to them or lighten the load on them, it's even extending their careers a little bit farther, or, you know, keeping them a little bit more healthier from
100%.
breaking down or downtime that they're missing time.
Yeah, because I mean, those same people, they got to bend over and pick up their kids when they get home.
Well, that's it, right?
No, that's great that attention to detail is happening. I mean, it should, you know, that's so important. I wanted to get back to the load bearing masonry, and we were going to talk about something happening in New Brunswick right now that you were kind of.
Yeah, so I'll rewind a little bit just before we get started here, and it would have been early 2019. It was myself and a contractor from Moncton, Ron Cormier from Acadia Bricklayers, and we started talking. Okay, there's a lot of construction happening around Moncton that's in that 4 to 8 story range. Just the way the city's been moving, the population density is rising. I think we have a real opportunity in Moncton to bring load bearing masonry. Whenever we look to Halifax and HRM, especially in the downtown, you're not doing 4 to 8 story buildings. You're doing 20. That's a little bit outside our range. Although there is an opportunity when you get out from the downtown and when you start talking like Larry Utech area, there might be a real opportunity there. But anyway, so we realized there was an opportunity in Moncton. So the Atlantic Masonry Institute started off by spending some money and sending a local engineer to our design course in Ontario to really teach them all the ins and outs of structural design with masonry. So after he finished that course, which is not a small amount of work, it's like a 4th year undergrad structural course that we post at our head office there every year. Then he came back, and then we've worked with the Canadian Concrete Masonry Producers Association to fund a study. And what we wanted to look at is, let's say we have a 4-story building in Moncton. We got a footprint from Spitfire Designs, who came in and designed it for us. They're a mover in the Moncton market. And let's design this building with load-bearing masonry. Let's design it with conventional wood framing, and let's design it as a reinforced concrete building. Let's see what the numbers say. At the end of the day, where we ended up for this 4-story building, and it actually gets cheaper as you go up with masonry, is that compared to wood framing, by the time you incorporated the time savings that you're going to have, because you're so much faster with masonry, and I'll talk about the system in a minute, masonry was only a 4% premium over conventional wood framing. And we can go into the benefits of one versus the other, but the main thing is just the non-combustibility of it. So if you're an architect or a designer, you're very familiar what I mean by non-combustible, just with regards to the valuation of your building, the durability of it. If a fire ever breaks out, it is going to have nothing to eat from floor to floor. It's like not that wood is super flammable, but that fire is going to eat at it. It's combustible. Whereas if you have block walls between every unit, when the fire hits that block wall, sure, it might eventually eat away at it. It's going to take an awfully long time. Just the walls that we needed to hold up the structure are going to give you a minimum 2-hour fire rating, whereas the code minimum for that building was only 1 hour. So if you're spending that 4% premium, now you have superior sound transmission between all your units. You're never going to hear your neighbor. You're going to have twice the fire rating or more, depending on comparing it to a wood-framed building. Mold is never going to be an issue if you have any kind of a flooding event, like a tenant overflows the toilet and leaves it for a few days, and all of a sudden the moisture sucks in. If you have a wood building, that's just going to create a situation for mold, right? Not going to happen with concrete masonry. And for the Moncton market specifically, we were about 22%, give or take, cheaper than just a reinforced concrete building. And that's going to be very different if you take that to the Halifax market. People know that concrete forming is quite a bit cheaper here in Halifax compared to Moncton. But will it eat up 22%? I don't think so. So I still think even in HRM, it's a very viable option. So we went through that process. We developed that report. We pushed it out. It's on our website, www.atlanticmasonryinstitute.com. You can find it there. And then we found a developer that was willing to give it a shot in Moncton. So currently right now there's a building, it's called the Fox Creek Multi-Res. It's got its foundations poured. They're about to do their grade slab, and then masonry is scheduled to start in April. But that's going to be currently it's a 5. They're pushing to get a bylaw switch to get it to 6. I'm feeling it's going to be 6, but it's going to be a 6-story apartment building. It's all going to be load-bearing masonry. The CMU blocks are going to be holding up the entire system. The floor system that typically works best for us is like a precast hollow core plank. If you've seen them before, they just got all these like circular holes along the edge. But what's really great about them is since they're precast and they land on site, you just got to lay them down, grout them, and you can keep moving. So what we say for load-bearing masonry is if your contractor understands the industry and they understand to have the right amount of manpower on there, you can go up a story every 2 weeks. So if you start your project in the spring, even if that's a 7-8 story building, you can have your building completely enclosed before winter time hits. And then you can work on your interior finishes all through the winter. And then whenever the spring comes, you can go on and put on your veneer. And it just really speeds up the process. So I think if I recall correctly, for the total construction time, and we got Acadian Construction was the general that ran that project, and they ran project timelines for us. The load-bearing masonry total project completion was somewhere along the line of 16 weeks faster than both concrete and conventional wood framing.
So you're saving them 4 months on the schedule.
4 months on the schedule.
You're 22% cheaper.
Then concrete in Moncton, yeah.
And then concrete in Moncton. And you're not far more fire rated than these other materials.
Correct. So like it provides a lot of benefits. Now, masonry is not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution for every project. I'll talk about what some of our downfalls are. If on the first story you have a big commercial space, that's going to be tough for us. From a structural design perspective, we need wall continuity from the top floor to the bottom floor. So if you're imagining this mall system or all these offices aren't bad because you can still have those walls in the same place. It's a typical layout to what you'd see for residential. But that's not ideal for us. Whenever you run into underground parking, which these buildings that we're looking at are, you have to be a little bit clever with how you do your underground parking because, again, we need that wall continuity from top to bottom. So you can't just stick a load-bearing wall in the middle of your building because if that gets down into the parking garage, all of a sudden you lose your driving lane. So it can be done. That's why we really work from an industry standpoint, working with the designers that if they're willing to consider load-bearing masonry, all right, let's go into a meeting room and let's talk floor plans and wall layouts so that you don't get 20 hours into this process and realize you put a wall where you shouldn't have and all of a sudden you got to go back to square one.
Yeah, so obviously you with the Atlantic Masonry Institute and the contractor that's involved, which I think you said is Ron with Acadia Bricklayers in New Brunswick, were very instrumental in making this happen. Like, I know we were talking about it earlier, but it's been a while since there's been in Atlantic Canada a fully load-bearing masonry building, right?
Yeah, like
it's been
there's
15 or 20 years or maybe more.
Might be more. Like it's nothing. It can be typical to see a structural masonry wall, but as the primary structural system in your building, at least 15, 20 years. I know a lot of the old, it might be a little less than. I think the Andrew Hall residence on UPEI might have been a load-bearing masonry building, but that would have been 10 plus years ago. That'd be pushing 15.
Yeah.
So like it's just not a very common
Right.
building
So,
material.
so you're
right
like,
here.
obviously you're very proud of that. Are you hoping for like a bit of a spin-off from that? Like maybe you could see more, and not just in New Brunswick, but
Yeah, well, we got this first project going, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one aspect is showing that the numbers work. The second is actually backing it up and proving that concept.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you start seeing this project go up in Moncton, I hope that you start seeing other developers in the area seeing this, like, what are they doing? That's going up with masonry. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask some questions about that. And even here in HRM, like I mentioned, right in the downtown, you're probably not going to see these buildings because 20 stories is pushing it for us. We're limited by our compressive strength. We just don't have it. But if you're talking Dartmouth, Larry Utac, Bedford, there's quite a few 8-story buildings that go up in those areas, and we are very cost competitive. And the concrete is a lot cheaper here, but even with that, you still see a lot of wood framed buildings going up. And whenever I mentioned that 4% premium that you get with masonry over wood framing, those numbers were taken in 2019. So the drastic increases that you've seen in lumber prices, that doesn't incorporate that. Not that masonry's gotten cheaper over that time, but masonry's consistent with its price increases because we have that supply and demand here locally. We're not relying on other
you're
industries.
not relying on lead times. From
Not relying on
ingredients
lead
coming
times. Our
from all
block
over the
producers
place.
aren't shipping to Quebec. They're not shipping
Yeah.
to the U.S. because they all have their own block producing plants.
Yeah.
You know, so we have the materials here locally. We make them here locally. We have our laborers here locally. We're not going to get those lead times that other industries are going to have.
And that's where I was going to jump in and say that you got to have you have to take a look at that especially with COVID right now, the lead times on materials where, so far we haven't had too many interruptions in the masonry industry, aside from a little bit of
Due to the
insulation
fact that
or
it's
some
local.
steel. Exactly, due to the
Yeah.
fact that it's local. And from what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong on this, from what I'm hearing, I know in the carpentry industry, is that even holding the price points right now for wood at this time, I don't think it's any longer than a week
Yeah.
that they're holding prices on it. I don't
Yeah.
think we're not running into that with
I think steel's 2 weeks. And,
with the masonry, right? So I mean, there are obviously we do have rebar and steel components,
Yeah,
with
Z-girts
ties and
and,
stuff, right?
all kinds of things that you're
But
insulation.
it hasn't been
barrier.
so bad yet with our schedule, and I think that will be a huge advantage moving forward, especially coming out of COVID, where when all the restrictions are loosened, how much more business is going to pick up, and how much more demand is there going to be more lead times with that.
And it's not just that's a it's a possibility, right? Like there's volatility in other markets where we have a little bit more consistency than some of the other building materials would have.
Yeah, that's for sure. You mentioned earlier you guys worked on the shipyard.
Yeah.
So down on past Barrington and Water Street here on the shoreline, you're driving by, everybody sees the big, where the ships go in,
blue
big
overhead door.
big blue overhead door. So you guys did all the
interior masonry.
interior masonry in there.
Yeah, it was a big project for us.
Must have been.
That's got to be about 6 years ago now.
been
5,
up
6
a long
years ago.
time.
It's
It
been
has
up
been
for a
up for a
little
long
bit.
time.
Yeah, man, time flies.
Yeah.
But no, it's been a good. That was a great project for us. We've never done any block work to that scale. I think the next closest one to that scale would have been the helicopter hangars at Shearwater Base.
Right. How many
Uh,
bays
for
are
that.
in that shipyard? There's got to be.
Oh,
There can't be that many though. I mean, I know it's huge, but like they need the space they need just
it's
for one ship.
Well, that's it. So down the main, I'd say
You said
corridor,
two
that
big-
whole thing. It's basically was wide open. We were there. I don't know
Like
what gear
2
they've got in
football
since we
fields
left.
long or something.
But it was
I've
hot.
walked it. It takes a while to get from one end to the other.
It is. It's a lot. It's a lot of hiking. I know a lot of my guys when they were working there. Once we got up to the upper floors, like walking those stairs
Yeah.
every single day,
Jeez.
and doing the work. But no, it was a big project. It went well for us. Definitely, we hadn't run any crew. Well, I hadn't anyway. Run any crews of that size. I think we had 30 to 40 guys in there at one time. We were running 3 crews through the winter. So yeah, it was a learning process, and it was a great project for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. What about so you guys have mostly do stuff in Nova Scotia, but have you guys done some stuff in other provinces?
We've
as well?
done stuff in New Brunswick. We haven't gone to Newfoundland yet, but we do stuff in Cape Breton. Our family's mostly based.
Right, because your dad's from Cape Breton.
Dad's from
right?
Cape Breton, so we have some roots there with Masons out of Cape Breton, and any projects that fit our schedule that we can get down there to do, we never mind going down to Cape Breton or going around wherever we got to. But we like to, most of our core guys are around Halifax or HRM, so
Yeah.
we try to keep it close there for them.
And you mentioned you're a third generation
Third
masonry,
generation.
right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
you're-
basically everybody in my family's been involved in masonry one way or another.
Right.
So my grandfather was a bricklayer. My father's a bricklayer. My father's brothers have all been laborers, involved heavily. Even my dad's oldest brother, he does all of our safety now. He came back on board and
Right.
consults with us. He has his own safety company doing training and stuff, but he came on board, and that would be our estimator Jeff's father. So
Right.
it's kind of a
It's very
amazing.
family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
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 great.
all across the board too. Like he is third generation, that's special. But if you talk to most of the bricklayers out there, and this is a good story and a bad story, a lot of them have known a bricklayer, whether it's their father or their brother or their uncle.
Yeah.
There's some connection to that masonry industry that would kind of guided them, like, you know what, you should try this. So it's great that our bricklayers are kind of talking and trying to groom the next generation, but it kind of also shows that we struggle from a communication standpoint getting our trade out there for new bricklayers.
Yeah.
So like it's awesome that they're talking and they're generating our industry just through kind of their family and family
Right.
connections. But we also need to find a way to bring more
Yeah, you
people
wanna
in from outside,
continue that generational.
or create new
yeah.
family generation lines
Yeah.
within the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to revamp the whole image of that craft.
Yeah.
Somehow. I don't
And,
know
then
how you
that's,
go
and that's
about
what
that.
we're trying to do, and we're trying to do that within our company as well, with AMI and within the industry. But within our company, we're trying to start it from that pride point, you know, showing up and taking pride in your work, because masonry is that trade that, you know, you could show up to work today and have the worst, hardest day you've ever had, and you're happy that the day's done and it's gone. And it's that same trade that you could work your ass off all day,
Yeah.
and you're ecstatic about how much you got completed, because you visually get to see what you've completed at the end of the day. When you walk away, you know you built that wall, or you put up that brick or that block, and the reward that you get from that, once you start doing it on a regular basis, you can't beat it.
Yeah, if you ever go for a drive with a bricklayer, he'll happily, or she will happily point out every building that they've worked on. See that building there? Yeah, I did that. I was over on this elevation. I was working over there. Oh, you see that building? I did that over there.
Even Darrell could look out the window here and probably point to 360 degrees, about 4 or 5 different
And
jobs
believe it or
that
not,
he's done.
that's a big thing, especially for the guys that got kids. When you're driving out with your kids around there, oh, Dad worked there today, or you know,
Yeah.
I go down town with my father, and oh man, I remember when we were up 50 feet, 100 feet in the air working off that building, laying and doing this and that, and you get to hear those stories and how the jobs used to go, and that pride, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, you're driving downtown Halifax, you get to see brickwork.
Yeah.
You know, you get to see masonry everywhere, whether it's stonework, whether it's brickwork, whether it's block work.
And it's not just new construction; it's old construction too, right? Like it's not just the oldest material, but it's durable. It lasts. Like if you worked on that building 70 years ago, unless they reclad it for some reason, odds are it's that same masonry on the exterior of that building. You just get such a longer lifespan with masonry than some of the other traditional materials.
And I think, like, you know, masonry is one of it's, you know, it's very blue collar, and like it has that certain aura about it. And no matter how much far advanced the industry gets in technology and stuff, we're still going to need people doing masonry on job sites. You know,
And
it's like it also, I think, like we said earlier about estimating, like there's so much that's entailed in masonry estimating, and also just the site workers and how skilled some of those guys are that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years, you know, how the quality of the work. But it's like you show up to do masonry like you show up to hockey practice. Like, I mean, you got to show up to work. It's hard work.
Well, when I got into this trade, I always loved masonry. I never planned to be a bricklayer. I was going to school at Darrell. I was taking urban design and city planning, and I was going to try and play hockey at the next level after I finished university. And before I went away to tryouts, Bricklayers Union approached me, and they were doing a promotion. So they come to me and said, listen, you've been doing it your whole life. If you get involved with this, we'll take care of your schooling, we'll take care of your tools and stuff. And I sat back and I looked at benefits and what you got, and that's what drew me into masonry. I had no plan 100% to get into masonry. And then, you know, you start looking at what it gave back to me and what, you know, provided me with summer work, weekend work, whatever. And then now it's going to be able to provide me a trade. And it was just something that started just as a summer job when school was off with the family, right? So it's just one of those trades that people don't realize. I thought when I got into it, oh man, I've been doing this most of my life. I've been surrounded. I got a great advantage in here, right?
Yeah.
And then you're 5, 6, 7 years later before you develop that skill. Like you go to school for 3 to 4 years, right, while you're doing your apprenticeship, but it takes you to get to the level where these journeymen are and their abilities.
Yeah.
6 to 7 years of putting in the work.
That's no different than tapers and drywall or
Yep.
people doing EFIS and stucco. I mean, if you haven't done that for 10 years, you can't even let them go to the job.
And that's the thing,
experience level is
and I think
through
that's
the roof.
part of the reason why we have such a hard time getting people into trades now is because everybody wants now. Like the first thing that I hear someone coming out of school, it's not, hey, how can I get better? It's
How can I get the top position
exactly
as fast as possible?
How come I'm not doing what the guy that's been doing this for 50 years has been doing?
Yeah, and you're going to experience a gap in that too if you don't have like the crew of young people like being trained currently.
And that's it.
You're
And
going to have
masonry,
a gap.
I know we said that it's 53 years old is the average age, but really masonry is a young man's game. Like you're relying on the young guys to come in to
100%.
do the heavy lifting, to do that little push as the older guys are declining, right? Yeah. And if we could get to the point where, we got a good influx, like right now, it's just sporadic. Like I don't think we have any more than 7 to 10 people attending a school a year.
So there's been a few changes there. The schools really struggled, like at NSCC over the last 10 years. But we recently made a change.
Did you say NSCC?
NSCC. Yeah. So they're doing our pre-apprenticeship program. So like most apprenticeship trades, pathway. you have 2 pathways. You have direct entry. You can take a pre-apprenticeship program and go in. So they were really struggling with their attendance, and they came to us and they're like, what can we do? Like, we're really stuck here. You guys are the industry. We need some insight. So through the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, we formed a trade advisory committee. I sat on it, Darrell sat on it, a few other contractors, Union was on it. And we talked with NSCC, like the community college, like, what's going on? Like, just explain to us the way you work, and then we'll try and help you do a better job. So what we ended up doing is we actually increased their course from 22 weeks to a full semester of 35 weeks. So we added 13 weeks to their program. And in doing so, we switched them from, I can't remember what their classification was before, but now it's a core program. And core programs are government funded because it's developing people into the trades. So they dropped their tuition from about $9,000 to about $3,000 by increasing their program by 13 weeks. And those extra 13 weeks, we formed a side committee with some good Masons here locally, and they really developed, all right, what do we want to really increase in those first 13 weeks? And Darrell will say it better than anybody. Whenever you get someone to first land on the job site, the amount of safety training they need it's pretty significant. Like if you talk about masonry, you got to work at ground level, but you also got to work at heights. And it's not just at heights, you're working on tube scaffolding, you're working on the swing staging, you're working on all these different things. So you need a lot of safety training. So we really wanted to incorporate, when we went to the community college, like, it's great that they're learning more hand skills. We can work to help develop that. Please bring more safety training involved with that so that when they show up on the job site, I don't then have to send them away for 2 weeks to do more training. And that's one of the main things I think.
And that was the biggest problem that I had. I'd get calls from the school or get calls from kids that are going to school as bricklaying. Can I get a job with you for the summer? Yeah, no problem. Do you have this, and this for your safety that I can put you to work? No. Well, sorry, man. Until you get that, I can't take that risk on a teaching you, right?
That's a problem in a lot of other trades too.
100%. So it's almost, I feel as though in a lot of the trades that we're skipping that step. Like everybody wants to be at the end where they're a bricklayer, and everybody wants to be in where they're a carpenter or whatever trade they're in. They want to be there in their profession, but there's so many roads.
So out of the 60 to 100 employees you have at any given time throughout the year, how many of these people have their license to operate the swing staging and the hydro mobiles?
Most of our guys, most of our policies require the majority of our men to be trained. So like we'll put different things in place. Like for CPR, if you work for us, everybody has to have CPR. It's not what the rule is in Nova Scotia, but if only one person on your site has CPR and that's the person that goes down, you're up against. So like that, we try to keep everybody as we can, as well-rounded in the training as we can. Because then, if a guy shows up sick or a guy can't make it in for the day, you've got someone that can fill that role.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think we're almost ready to wrap it up. Do you guys have anything else that you kind of want to mention on behalf of, your AMI or Darum that you just kind of want to get out there?
Yeah, I got maybe a couple of things. And we talked a lot about apprenticeship, obviously, but we didn't really talk about what we're doing as AMI in specifics to try to help with this. So we are focused on trying to get into high schools and introducing masonry. So what we ended up doing is right before COVID hit, we started our first school. So we worked with Hands East out in Elmsdale area, and we got into their high school and we developed a 4-week curriculum to work within their trade school, where they were already building this mock motel. So they were going in doing the stick framing. They were already going in doing the electrical, the plumbing, whatever. Why not introduce them? Let's do a little masonry veneer along the outside. So just increasing the scope of what they're learning. But
Right.
hey, masonry is a trade too, and there's going to be some really cool stuff with it. So we brought a contractor and we worked on hand skills for a couple of days. Then we talked about, okay, here's how you plan out a project. We did like level lines for them, so it was nice and easy for them to lay level. And then all right, let's mix some mortar up and let's do this. So then we went and they actually started putting bricks on the wall. It wasn't the prettiest job we've ever seen, but I think the kids had a lot of fun. And we did some interviews after and got some takeaways and understood maybe how we would change it differently. But the school board loved it. What AMI did is we donated our contractors' time. We donated all the tools to the school. Like, listen, we'll give you guys 5 toolkits. You can keep them as long as you run this program every year. Yeah. And then, okay, now let's move on to the next school. So then we had a school down in Bridgewater that we got all the tools delivered to. We had the mason trained to go into the school. However, COVID hit and we weren't able to get in. Here at Dartmouth High, Darrell was going to be going in to run that same program. We never got to the tools portion. But we were ready to do that. Right now in New Brunswick, we just finished donating 12 tool sets to 2 schools in the French immersion curriculum. So we're going to be in Skaduk and Buktush starting high school programs this year, where we're going to get masons in the classroom running these little 4 or 5 week programs, just again to expose them to what masonry is. And I don't really expect all those kids to join the masonry industry, but it's just starting the conversation. And even the kids that walk past the showroom and they're seeing this masonry wall go up, hey, that's kind of cool that they're making that. So our goal is, obviously COVID's kind of changed things, because our whole thing is we want hands-on learning for the kids. We don't just want to drop everything off and say have some fun. We want them to do it right and do it safe as well. So we were always trying to do 2 to 3 new schools every year in Nova Scotia, 2 to 3 new schools in New Brunswick every year, until we got our program into almost as many schools as we can. And we're ready to back that up and provide the funding that we need, and me pinch my contractors' arms and tell them to go into the schools and start doing some teaching, because that's their next generation.
Have you been into some schools, Darrell?
I haven't yet. As Andrew said, I was set up to go into, I think it was Dartmouth High School, just do the same program that they had out in East Hants, and it just fell through right now with COVID. I'm expecting it to pick back up once everything starts getting cleared for that stuff. To go, but I'm looking forward to it, just to be able to get our trade out there a little bit more and allow people to see that masonry's just not brick and block. There's so many other components. There's ties being put on. There's grouting. There's rebar. There's staging set up. There's insulation.
Well, even like you said, all the different kinds of masonry veneer that you can get into. There's just it's endless.
All the materials.
My grandfather told me a long time ago. He said, "I got 70 years in this trade, and I don't know a thing about it." There's that much to go, right? So just
I can see.
Just that experience for someone that's that well-rounded to say, like, listen, you're going to learn something new every day in this racket.
Yeah, should get your grandfather teaching all the young guys.
No, I'd love to. I don't know if they can handle that. I don't think they can handle that the old school, how it once was. So.
Where can people find AMI online? Is it just the website? You guys have social media as well?
No, we don't have any social media currently, and what I would say is that any contractors that might want to possibly join, or suppliers that want to kind of help support our masonry industry, they can reach out to myself, and you can find me at the AtlanticMasonryInstitute.com. If there's any architects, designers, engineers that might have some questions about masonry, I encourage you to reach out to me through the Canada Masonry Design Center. It's the same number to call, but you go to the CMDC website, which is CanadaMasonryDesignCenter.com. You get a better snapshot of what we do on a national level, and you can call me at any time, send me an email. You find my contact information on there. And even if it's something super simple, like I'm designing this wall, I've never done it before, do you mind taking a look at it? I'm not going to sign off on it for you, but I can point out a few things that I think might not look normal. Or if you're talking about, I got this structural wall coming up, like what are the main things I've designed to the 2010 building code? I've never designed to the 2015.
Right.
What are the main things I need to think about?
Yeah.
And then I'll just tell them, then we'll talk seismic design, and we don't need to bore anyone on this podcast about that. But,
We've been geeking out a little bit, though. We've been doing all right.
well, my family hates how much I talk about masonry is all I know.
That's hilarious. So what about you, Darrell? Do you want to give, like, for anyone who's watching the podcast who, is just hearing about Darum for the first time, or even, whatever the scenario, like for them to reach out? You guys have a website? You want to mention your email?
No,
or anything like
website's under construction right now, but I can put my phone number and my email out there. My phone number is 209-5829. You can reach me at any time for that. Anybody that's looking for employment opportunities, a little information about masonry, or maybe some information about Darum Masonry. That's
awesome. Yeah, well, listen, guys, like, really appreciate your time coming on today. I think this is a great dynamic on an episode to have a contractor from the industry and then someone, like Andrew with the Institute, to come on and kind of get both sides of the coin and all the company history with Darum. And it's been a pleasure talking to both of you today. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us, Dan. It was a pleasure.